Welcome to the Art Labs podcast. Our special guest today is Mr. Jordan Long. Jordan, dude, I can't believe we finally got you on this show, man. What's going on, dude?
Thanks, Bill. No, appreciate you taking the time.
All right, Jordan, for the few people out there who don't know who you are, give everybody the 2-minute spiel on Jordan Long and what he's doing today.
Okay, yeah, my name's Jordan. I'm the co-founder and CTO of a company called Nectar. It's a company I started with my co-founder Kavita when I was about 19 at UC Santa Barbara. We built a platform that allowed students to connect with each other in the same class. Started as this kind of chat tool, and we grew it throughout college. And then during COVID, it became very popular, and that's kind of where we got our first break. We had 10,000 students sign up at once, and it was a crazy time. And that's where we also raised our first round of funding. And so,
All right, don't go too far. Don't go. This show is about putting you in a time machine, Jordan. So
oh, okay,
don't go too far. We're gonna get there. We're gonna get to how all that happened. Okay, so I don't want to spoil anything. I don't want to spoil anything. Super interesting though, and I have a bunch of questions already, but I'm gonna hold back just because if I start asking those questions, I think it's gonna ruin the
yeah,
show. So we're gonna hold back. But I got those questions in my head. All right, now a couple more questions before we get going. One, what year did you graduate high school, and where were you on the planet at
okay,
the time?
that way back. Well, I'm originally from Honolulu, Hawaii, so I graduated high school in 2016 from Punahou. Same high school as Barack Obama. Fun fact, but yeah, it was a good place to grow up.
So they got Obama's picture everywhere in that high school then, right?
Yeah, in a couple places, but not too much. We try to be a little underrated.
So it's not like over the top, kind of
No,
like
no.
Obama was here.
Yeah, it's well known enough, but yeah.
All right, that's cool. So 2016, okay, that gives us a general sense of tech there. All right,
Hmm.
now I need you to clear your head. Don't think too hard. All right, clear your head. First memory of you working on a computer. First memory that pops in your head of you working on a computer. What was that?
Gosh, playing with GarageBand on a little Mac, those super thick laptops. That would probably be my first memory.
So you're a musician then, dude.
Yeah. I like to describe myself as more of a, creative or a creator. I like building and making stuff. I always have a bunch of different hobbies going on, so, I
I
think
know,
I've
but
always liked tinkering.
was the music you were creating like beats and stuff, or are you
Yeah.
playing like guitar, or was all that?
No, I have no technical ability with instruments or anything. I played, trumpet throughout high school, but that's about it. But no, I kind of like the fact that you could kind of make anything sound good using the tools at hand. You didn't actually have to be, a talented musician. You could just use the beats that they provided you.
See, like, so now the first thought that comes into my head is the acapella movie with Andra Kendrick, where she's like on her Mac making all the beats and stuff, right? Like,
Yeah.
so that was you, right? Like, you're Anna Kendrick, man. And
Gosh.
what
Yeah.
was the acapella movie called? Damn, I can't remember. I love those movies too.
Pitch Perfect.
Pitch Perfect, dude. Come on, that was a good movie. I was shocked when that movie came out. And my kids were young. I mean, it's an old movie, but I was like, it was different, it was different at the time.
Yeah, yeah, it was fun, but I've never been compared to Anna Kendrick, so I'll take it as a compliment.
No, but that's the first thought to pop in my head. I can see you like jamming with the big headset there, dude. So you got a little turntable, like those electronic turntables at home? Come on.
Yeah, yeah, I don't know about that. No, I think you asked my first, experience, and as a kid, it was just like a laptop, and that was about it. It wasn't very sophisticated.
Man, I can't believe you quit, dude. That was it. You could have been playing at Ultra in Miami last weekend, bro. It could have been you.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I recently moved up to the Bay, and it seems like everyone here's a DJ of some sort. So maybe I have to get back into it.
Yeah, if I want to like get the kids really upset, I start telling them like my DJ. Here's my DJ name for the kids when it's when you have kids, the only way to get them back is to try to like be in their world. So I tell them my DJ name is Low Key Yay because they love to say yay and low key, right? Low Key Yay, and
I
then they
like that.
start screaming at me, and yeah, I always threaten to get one of those little turntables so I can. Well, that's cool. All right, so you're jamming there. How old were you then? You said you were like teenager at that point before high
Yeah,
school.
it's probably like 12 or 13 or something.
I know, but the trumpet, my dad was a sax player. Anything with a
Mm.
reed, he could play, right?
Wow.
Trumpet obviously doesn't have a reed. I always thought the trumpet was the coolest instrument of them all for some reason. I don't know. Chet Baker
Hmm.
and Louis Armstrong, right? He played the trumpet,
Yeah,
right? Like
Miles
I
Davis.
always,
Yeah, all the cool
yeah,
guys play the trumpet.
all the cool guys, man, could play that trumpet, and they all could sing too. It was like if
Mm.
you played the trumpet, you had a not great singer. Like if you ever listen to Chet Baker sing, like he's not going to be the most amazing singer, but he can hit notes and stay in tune that is just out of control for me.
Yeah.
Now the heroin probably didn't hurt Chet, but you know,
Yeah, that's probably what I was missing. I'm not a very good singer or trumpet player, so
so you gave up on that too
yeah,
after high
yeah, I
school.
did several years of that and several years of marching band. I guess you could say I was a band nerd, but
Oh,
wasn't very
marching
good.
band is
That's
cool
kind of
though.
cool.
The that's really technical actually. I had a friend's son was got into the marching band stuff and he was showing me the layouts and the technical aspects of it, and that's some serious stuff.
Yeah, yeah, no, and we did get to go on cool trips. So I was in the inauguration for Obama, which was fun. So we get to
Really? Oh,
represent.
because the high school at the time.
Yeah, yeah. So we're
Oh,
in the
dude.
freezing cold Washington D.C. playing trumpet. Kids from Hawaii were not used to that. So
No, 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 no.
it's a
I,
neat
I I
experience.
went to school in upstate New York. I call it South Canada,
Mm,
and I couldn't take it anymore. I moved to Miami, dude. So like I'm hearing you there, dude. That's an amazing memory you're gonna have for forever that you were able to participate in that.
yeah, it afforded a really great opportunity, and I think that was like the one of the few good things that came out of it. Otherwise, it's just like 7:30 a.m. waking up and playing in the fields.
Yeah, but
Yeah.
now everybody jokes with you about the band camp. Remember the movie American Pie? You know, one time at band camp,
Yeah, I know. I try to avoid people or
yeah,
avoid
it's
telling
got to
people
be
that I went
so
there.
annoying, right? It's got to be
Exactly.
like if I hear one more person do that, I'm gonna strangle myself.
I
Yeah,
know. We
no,
get a
no, I
bad
get it.
rep. That's the problem.
Yeah, it's a shame though. If I handed you a trumpet, could you play it right now?
Uh,
Anything?
Probably not well. I
No, that's
got
fine.
rid of it a few years ago, because it's
Oh
just
man, dude.
not my thing.
You're gonna regret that, dude. You're gonna get back to it.
I
You're gonna get
know.
back to it. I know. So tell me about high school a little bit, because high school is like the 4 years where you're kind of starting to form.
Hmm.
Are you playing sports? I know you're doing the band, and that's usually a full time gig. So I guess there's not sports going on or anything else
Yeah.
occupying time.
I
What
mean,
about the computer stuff at school? You had a lab? Like, what are you doing?
yeah. I mean, let's see. Man, this goes way back. I guess I did a little bit of wrestling
You're not
in
that
middle.
old, Jordan, to say it goes way back. I'm
I know.
55.
It
I
feels.
can say way back.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, sports wise, I mean, I did a little wrestling in early high school.
Oh, that's
I
cool.
didn't do a whole lot with computers. We had a robotics lab. I did that in middle school, but
Was that the VEC stuff? I think they call it VEC or
yeah, something like that. Yeah, where you kind of make these machines
yeah,
that
yeah, yeah. My
run routes
wife
you want to
taught
do.
that for a couple of years. Those are cool systems.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. But I guess it's fun because I'm not the traditional techie guy that was, programming at 12 or anything. I really just became interested in at college, and that's kind of where I saw my self-taught
Okay,
myself.
but don't go
Um,
there just yet because as you're
okay.
graduating high school, right? You've got to make a choice. I imagine
Yeah.
college is the choice you're going to make, right? And
Hmm.
but what were you thinking in terms of what you were going to study going
I
into
mean,
uni?
yeah, in high school, that's where I found my interest for entrepreneurship. My sophomore year, my English teacher had a project called the what was it, the quality project, and we had to make something of quality, and so, or
Like
do more
manufacturing
product.
kind of thing?
Yeah, or like identify something that's like the quintessential thing. And I drew a Tesla Model S, and that was where like, I was interested in technology. Elon Musk was like doing a bunch of cool stuff, and so I wanted to do what that guy did. And so later on that year, the very final few weeks of the class, she said you could do any sort of project you want. Like you just have to spend 24 hours total putting work into something. So a lot of people went on hikes. Some people made things. I made the business plan for a drone company, and I had, drawings of like a drone. I had the whole business
Wow.
plan. I had a pitch deck. And then I got permission from the president of the school to fly a drone that I had over the
That was
campus.
my next question. So you had a drone, so it wasn't like
Yeah,
okay.
yeah, it was cool because
But why did you need to fly the drone? So you got permission to fly the drone over the high school.
mhm.
What was the part of the project for that? Just to
It was kind of a demonstration of the technology. I obviously didn't like build the drone, but it was kind of, one of the early ones from DJI when they're becoming more popular and accessible. My dad is an architect, so he uses it to kind of like map the houses that he was making.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
I helped out with that. Uh, but
That's
yeah, I
cool,
think I
dude.
was just interested in building stuff, and it was yeah, demonstration of the tech to my peers, and I kind of just wanted to do the full thing, like learn as much as I could about business and design and technology.
Did you have
That's
to do the financial side of all that too? You had to
Yeah,
worry
yeah.
about
I did the
revenue and all that.
financial, the business plan, the
Okay.
market research, like how much will it cost, how big is the market, that whole thing. I just, learned as much about as I could, on my own. But I was really the only one of my friends that I knew was interested in that, and there was no business class, and so a lot of it was just self-taught.
So then I imagine you're going to uni for business. Is that the plan?
Yeah, well, like I said, I drew the Model S, and I was inspired by a lot of these people that, made these really big tech companies, and none of them were business majors. They were all engineers by trade. And so I actually went to UCSB for physics. And
Physics.
yeah,
Physics.
because
Out of all things, physics, dude. You're not even talking to me about physics, dude. You're
yeah,
wrestling, you're playing the trumpet, you're into business. Where's this physics stuff come from?
yeah,
That's not a
I
joke.
was as good at physics as I was at the trumpet, which is not very good. I applied for all the engineering schools, but the thing is, the engineering schools are really impacted, but no one wants to do physics, so you can get in for that, and you learn
Was
all
that
the
your
fun
back
stuff.
door? So that was your life hack. That was your
That
back
was the
door.
back door, yeah. So it ended up
Wow.
working out, and that's where some people got the shot
Okay.
with physics.
So that was the back door. I'm gonna go in for physics and then change my major at some point because
Hmm.
I know that I mean I'm interested in it, but this isn't really I know a lot of physics majors that have become computer science, like software developers and stuff. Yeah. But all right. So you get in for physics. You do your first year. You're taking these sort of physics classes. You're what else? I mean, you got to do your liberal arts studies too and all that.
Hmm.
So I mean, sort of talk to me a little bit more about that.
Yeah, well, physics at UCSB was interesting. They're known. I think it was Stephen Hawking's favorite, campus because they have a physics master's building right on the edge of the water, so you could see the whole ocean, and it's this really neat building. But yeah, the rest of the physics buildings were not the most funded. The engineering buildings had like the cool stuff. So going in, it's kind of these old decrepit kind of lecture halls, and you have about 10 or 15 people. It wasn't a big major, so you kind of got to know your peers around you, and that was kind of the fun part, is that these classes were super difficult, and you're just kind of getting into it, and they're very fast paced, and so you rely on other people to kind of help you out. So it's a group
You
effort.
also can't hide. I mean, if they're that smart, you
Exactly.
can't hide from the professors. You can't hide from, uh, failing or like you can't hide from anything at that
Yeah, you
point.
can't fall asleep in class. They know your name. They can point at you. Like it was, it was nice though, because you get that kind of, more closed off experience, and you can build a relationship with your professors. And so, yeah, that first year was a lot of hours in the library, spending it with, some other people, and kind of just chugging through the homework as much as we could.
But you realized even more like this is not what I want to be doing.
Yeah, yeah, I do not want to be a physicist. That you kind of like look at the job prospects, and I guess you could go into tangential places that's not like just a physicist or just research. Yeah, there wasn't a lot for me. I didn't see a future there, so started thinking about other things.
Yeah, but now you're in the school. So how many
Hmm.
years of physics do you end up doing there?
Probably about a year.
So after that first year, you're like,
Yeah.
we ain't doing this anymore.
No, yeah, I looked into some other majors that were, that had a lot of overlap. I looked at environmental science. I kind of enjoyed the classes, had a lot of overlap, but didn't end up, switching. Looked into econ. but didn't do too well there. I have like, I don't do well at things that I don't find, super interesting. And I think a
Yeah,
lot of
but who
the,
does, dude? Who
yeah,
does?
so, but none of the majors were there. UCSB didn't have a business school. A lot of the other, popular majors were impacted. You can't just hop over to CS. So it was a
You
tough
just can't
spot.
take CS classes at that point.
No, because you're a freshman.
Mm,
The thing that's kind of frustrating to me is that they make you take all the GEs and all this stuff for the first 2 years. So during your
yeah,
first
yeah,
two
yeah.
years, you can't take anything that you actually enjoy. You have to go through all the requirements
Yeah, the
just
60
to get.
credits of nonsense that, though, every once in a while, like I found anthropology in that process, and I really loved my anthropology class. I mean, there must have been some liberal arts class that you thought was, and not going to be your life, but you must have thought was cool, right? I mean,
Yeah,
that's the part of it.
yeah. I mean, the philosophy was a really cool class. I actually did enjoy that one. I didn't fall
Yeah.
asleep, but it was interesting, and it was very like esoteric, like what things actually exist and what things don't. That was
I
nice.
liked philosophy. Philosophy. I never liked psychology. I just never liked psychology. I thought the teacher was trying to brainwash me, even at the time. Like, I don't know. That wasn't my thing, man. I
Yeah,
don't know.
and art
So,
classes are always fun too. So.
so what are you gonna do, man? You're like at this university. You know you don't want to do physics. You can't sort of jump. You're gonna leave the school. Like, where's your head going?
Yeah, well, I desperately wanted to drop out starting my sophomore year. So I spent the better part of a year like trying to ask my parents, convince them to like, let me do some other thing. There was like a coding boot camp school that I thought was neat, but they're like, no, they've worked their entire lives, to be able to put me through college, and I'm like, not gonna do it. So then I ended up just
Wow.
not going
So
to
it
class.
wasn't your choice. Like at the end of the day, you could have said, "I'm not going back." I mean, you're not at that point. You're 20 or 19, 20. Like you could have said, "I know, no, obviously there's consequences. Like, good, now go get a job and find a place to live." I mean, you're yeah. What was your reason for just not saying no? You just didn't want to rock the boat, or
Yeah, well, it was just really hard to, convince my parents. And so, yeah, I stopped going to class and started looking to do other things. And I spent a lot of time, kind of at the library working on side projects. I tried to start like a rideshare company, which was it didn't work out at all, but I learned a lot from it. So I really just wanted to start doing
so.
my
Wait
own.
a second. So in your second year, you just said, "I'm not going to class anymore. I'm
Mhm.
not doing this," because all the greats stopped going to class, and you start thinking about the business that you want to
Mhm.
build, and you thought rideshare, which would require hundreds of millions of dollars in logistics,
Yeah, that was a
was
great idea.
what was your spin on rideshare at the time?
Well, when I was there, I didn't have a car because I'm not from California, and so I had to rely on the Facebook pages at the school to find people that were also going to the same destination I was. So I never went home for the whole, except for Christmas, and so like during things like Thanksgiving or summer break, I would visit my aunt in San Luis Obispo. So I have to go on the Facebook page, like, is anyone going to San Luis Obispo like sometime this week, and can I jump in your car and like pay you? And so that's how it would work. But it was a huge pain, and it seemed like there was a lot of inefficiencies with, connecting someone who was, driving up and students who didn't have a car who wanted to pay. So rather than a Facebook page, I thought that it would make sense to have, a dedicated platform that was a little bit more user friendly, that you could have reviews and know who your driver is and that sort of things.
It's not a
That
bad
was kind of
idea
what.
because even in the late 80s, I had the same problem. I lived 8 hours away through the mountains to get from upstate New York to Long Island, and I met a couple of people at the time that had cars that would go down there, right? But I always had the fear that if I got down, I got into a fight with my one buddy one time, and I didn't think he was driving me back to school. And my mom was like, "He's driving you back, or you're dead." And I didn't want to take a bus, dude. That was like a 24-hour adventure. So, I mean, that problem has existed since the probably the beginning of time. So that's
Yeah.
super interesting.
And yeah, well, I didn't know that at the time. I thought it was pretty unique, but it turns out, a dozen other people had done the same idea, before, and but I thought it would be, there's some viability to it because the guys who made Lyft it originally was Zimride and started at UCSB. So I was like, there must be something here with the rideshare things. poked around and I ended up becoming like the admin of a 20,000 person Facebook page, like trying to make this thing work. And
Wow.
um, yeah, it was, but it didn't really pan out. But like from it, I learned about, open source technology and like, the market, like a marketplace, trying to like bring people together to like get the critical mass to make it work. So,
Was this
through it.
like you're dedicating 20 hours a week to this thing at some point? The
Yeah,
first
I mean,
Kickstarter?
this was one of the earlier smaller projects. I wouldn't say I spent that much, but then once that kind of waned and I wanted to try something else, that was kind of the genesis of Nectar, which maybe I won't get into yet unless you want to, but
Well, what year of uni did you start thinking about Nectar? Was it year 3?
oh gosh. No, it was still my sophomore year, so it was kind of like the end of my freshman year, beginning of sophomore year was like the rideshare thing, and that was just kind of very, uh, informal, like basic. Didn't do a whole lot, but I kind of tinkered around. But then later on my sophomore year, it was like April 2018. That was the official launch day of Nectar. So like February, March, that's when I started tinkering with it of 2018.
So that first, okay, your third semester, right?
Mhm.
Grades. What did they look like if you're not really focused on school at that point?
Oh God, I probably had like a
Do you have like financial aid or your parents are paying for this thing?
no, that was the thing is like I was very fortunate. I didn't have any student loans. Parents worked really hard to put me through college, and that was like they didn't want me throwing that away. But I also didn't want to like waste their money. I was like, just stop paying for me so that I can like I don't care, I'll work a job or do whatever. But yeah, no, by that point I had like a 2.0, 1.9.
All right, you're not like it wasn't like sub 1 because you really just completely gave up. You just
Yeah, well, I had my first year of grades, so then the average, you can never really get below that. But I basically had,
oh,
you
if you
know,
stop going to class, you can get below that, dude.
yeah. You can go for like the no passes. Yeah, but it ended up being like about a 2.0 all things,
All right, so that's fair. You did the bare minimum you had to just sort of stay respectable.
Yeah, more or
All
less.
right,
Yeah.
no, that's fair. So, so tell me about the Nectar idea. So now the rideshare thing is sort of done.
Hmm.
Does this I has this idea been brewing in your head during the rideshare thing, or it just sort of just popped out of nowhere right when you needed it?
Well, yeah, it was around that era. I mean, I was still technically a physics major, still technically had to like take a bunch of classes, and that's where I was trying out other majors, going to like econ classes, and like these econ classes were, night and day. Instead of, the 12, 15, 20 people in the physics classes, this was easily, 1,000 students shoved into a
Yeah,
lecture.
now you can get lost, bro. This is it. I love
Yeah,
those
you
classes.
kind of hide in the back and fall asleep, but like it was crazy, and that's where you kind of look around and there's all these people doing the exact same class, and then they spread out over campus and they're all struggling on their own, and like there's no real way to get help late at night. And something that I relied on my physics courses was that you had the friends that you made that very first year, like you knew everybody. If you had a problem, you could go to them and they could help you out, and you'd be at the library in 1 in the morning. But once I like decided I wanted to do physics and stopped taking those classes, like I lost that community. So I didn't have anyone that I could go to. None of the people in my house took the same classes, and so that was kind of the beginning of Nectar. Was like, wouldn't it make sense if there was all some sort of like a platform or a place that the entire class could go to, who's all taking the same thing from the same teacher, and could communicate with each other? Because up until that point, I think the best solution instructor had was they're very well meaning. They like had the students who wanted to study together come down, walk to the base of the class in front of 1,000 people, and exchange emails. And that was the extent of, the communication at that point.
I always say ignorance is bliss. But you've had a little bit of experience already, right? But a platform for this many people to share this kind of stuff always seems, yeah, I'll knock this out in a week. And the engineering effort's always a little bit bigger.
Hmm.
Talk to me about the MVP part of that, like trying to put that together initially.
Yeah, well, like I had said throughout high school, I wasn't the one that coded at 12, and even in college, like I was interested in tinkering around, but like I didn't have that ability. So I spent like looking back, it took me 2 weeks to do what would today probably take me 2 hours because I had such a lack of understanding about how anything technical worked that I just spent, dozens of hours in the library trying to get this thing up. And what I realized was that it didn't make any sense to code myself. Like that was out of the question. There was no way that I could build anything like this because chat, requires real-time updates, database, and front end, and like I didn't know any of those things at the time. But what I did realize was that there was a lot of people. Chances are that someone made some sort of communication platform and put on the internet. So like, why reinvent the wheel? So I looked for some open source platforms, and the first one I found was Mastodon, which is actually like a Twitter clone. And I was like, okay, this might work. It's like free. I could take it and just make it mine, but put it for my
Just
own
run
use.
your own server. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, and you
yeah.
could do like hashtag homework one to like try and like filter, because the idea is that if you're struggling with something, you could go and find someone else doing the same thing. But pretty quickly that was like it would be hard to scale, and there's no real way to make it like class by class. And then I look over, and my girlfriend at the time, who I'm still with today, is using Slack for her housing job. So I was like, that's it. It's like a Slack clone. So I looked it up, did open source Slack, and
Mhm.
found Rocket Chat, and then that ended up being the first version of Nectar. It took me 2 weeks, dozens of hours, like a day.
How
Spent
did you
hours a day.
stand that up? What was the idea that you were using cloud computing for that, or you had to get a machine and
Yeah, well,
internet
if
access,
you,
IP addresses?
yeah, the time it was, Rocket Chat had some documentation for spinning it up on a droplet on DigitalOcean. So DigitalOcean is like a really easy way
Okay.
to
Yeah, 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 yeah.
host things, and so you just got
Yeah.
the image. I don't even think it was a Docker image. There's some like complicated process to get it up, and
I
I didn't
love
even
that
know.
you're not technical in any level and you're dropping droplets, Docker images, like
Yeah, well, that's why it took me so long because I like screwed up. I would have to delete completely everything, start from scratch. I'd screw something else up, get stuck, start from scratch. So it was just, and I didn't know what a terminal was at the time. So like they said, run this command, and I'm like, where? And then I like Google like where to run, this terminal command, and
Is
like
that
there's no
platform
answer.
still even around? What was it called? Rocket?
Rocket Chat, yeah. So they are
Rocket
still
Chat's still
around,
around? Okay.
and they did reach out
So
to
you
them.
basically put out your own Slack system using this Rocket Chat where
Hmm.
people could create channels, join those groups, communicate 24 hours a day, and then larger, like basically a Slack group that would support all this. But everybody could join for free at that point, right? You couldn't charge anybody.
Yeah, no, I didn't know what Stripe was or two payments. So yeah, it was for free, and but the droplets were pretty cheap, and so you just put it up, and that was when I threw it up on a Facebook page, because from my rideshare days I was the admin of these really big Facebook pages. So I was like, oh, this is the best place to
That was my
put it
next
in.
question. Yeah. How did you market that? Okay. So
Yeah.
you already had a captured audience there for because of the rideshare.
Yes, exactly. And it wasn't even the page that I was in charge of, but I just knew that there's a community of students that were constantly on here, and so I posted on our free and for sale, just basically like selling stuff, and said that hey, I made this platform. I think it would help people connect with their classmates, and if you're stuck at something at 2 in the morning, you can go on here, and all you gotta do is like find your class channel, join it, and you can get help from all of your
It's a
peers.
brilliant idea, actually. That was a perfect platform for that. But now it's costing you money, dude. I mean, it,
Ideally, like I wish it cost me a lot of money, but like we had 300 people sign up, but they were in 150 different channels, and a lot of people signed up and then left, so it really didn't like break the bank initially.
mm,
But there was that enough interest to get me to keep moving forward. I'm like, okay, there is something here.
so that,
Here at Ardan Labs, we believe in empowering companies to reach their full potential through innovative technology solutions. Trusted by small startups and Fortune 500 companies alike, we specialize in high-performance software consulting, training, staffing, development, and now AI. With over 14 years of experience, Ardan Labs has trained over 30,000 engineers and served over 1,000 companies worldwide. Whether you're mastering Go, Rust, Kubernetes, Terraform, or blockchain, we're your strategic partner for performance-grade solutions. Let's elevate your tech journey together. Reach out to Ardan Labs today.
so then what was your next plan? So you have this up and running. People are seeing it. anything like this is hard to start because you need people coming in. People need to
Hmm.
feel like it's worth, unless they're gonna also make sure there's value in there for them by inviting their friends and stuff. But
Right.
so how long is that running before you, I'm imagining that you replace that with something else at some point?
You would think, yeah, no, the until we continue using the same platform till today. So we're still on Rocket Chat. But the way we figured it out was that, quickly I realized that you can't have, if there's 300 people, maybe, every other one makes a channel, and then there's 150 channels on average, there's like two people in a channel. So we realized that we have to go class by class. And so this is when, my co-founder and I started working together. We lived in the same house of 13 people. And that's kind of where we, fell in love with the idea and both had the same problem and started working together to make this thing like a
Yeah,
real
but
thing.
I'm trying to understand what work together means. If this was open source, was it somebody forking this project and starting to make changes to it to sort of tailor it to your needs?
Yeah, well, on mine, it was a lot of figuring out about like the scaling part, like making sure that it didn't break, and trying to recruit computer science majors on our campus to help me adjust it. Because yes, it would have been a fork. I didn't know what that was either at the time, and so I was trying to find people to help me like engineer it because there's also a mobile app, and that's what was kind of the next sites was that they had an open source mobile app. So like, but the mobile app is significantly more difficult. You actually have to build it on your machine, deploy it to the app store, go through the process, and so yeah, I was doing the engineer side, trying to recruit engineers, and co-founder Cav was looking and trying to get it in classes, pitching to classes to kind of adopt it, getting teachers to put it on their page.
All right, so you're trying to get developers to work for free for some, right, in some form or another.
Exactly.
But I'm always interested in like revenue models because
Hmm.
right, free only goes so far, right? Especially since now it's money out of your pocket to keep the systems. Somebody's got to pay for it at the end of the day out, right? Even if
Hmm.
it's small, whatever small means to you, like somebody's paying for it. So, like, at what point do you wake up and say, we've got to be able to charge for this and we've got to find something that people are willing to pay for? I mean, talk to me about that because that's, I think, the hardest part of of a business. Can you get somebody to give you a dollar?
Hmm. Yeah, I mean that's a it's a good point. And like looking back,
Wait, you
I
know
think
what?
that.
Before you answer that question,
Mhm.
and I need an answer to that question, did you eventually graduate and get your degree?
Yeah,
No, I'm
no,
just
not
curious.
at all.
No,
No.
okay. All right, we're going to talk about that too. All right, talk to me about getting somebody to give you a dollar.
Yeah, well, that's the hard part because if you think about it, there's all these students, they go to this platform, but it's really hard to get students who are already broke to pay for something. And so then there's the instructor. Well, but the instructor's not going to buy a tool on behalf of 1,000 students. And so we realized that we had to go one level up. So we started talking to the instructional designers, the people that design the classes, administrators, the technology people for the campus, and I basically just started emailing them. We're like, hey, we made this platform. We have a few classes on it. Lots of students find it useful. Like, would you be interested in talking to us? And we were trying to find a way to get it so that, the campus, UCSB, bought Nectar on behalf of the instructors so that they could use it for all these classes. And there started the problem that we have till this day, which is these really long sales cycles trying to get, schools to buy something. And it's not easy. It takes a very long time.
So, what's their incentive? Like, you obviously have been able to do it. You were able to do it at that university, right?
Hmm.
It took you what, a year for them to finally agree to sort
Yeah,
of
two
pay
2 years
you?
probably, and a
2 years.
pandemic. Yeah.
So you think the pandemic was the big was the thing that helped you at the end because they realized the need at that point?
Yes, exactly. Like we were already kind of talking to them, trying to get this contract through, going back and forth, and it was just like taking forever. But then in March of 2020, so 2 years since we started in 2018, um, the pandemic hit, and UCSB realized like, oh my gosh, we need to take every single class online in like a week or two. And so they came to us and were like, all right, signed, done. We'll, license your platform. And that's where we got our first check from our school. And so that was super neat. But it was also ridiculously stressful because we had to
So
onboard
they
all these students.
so they moved all classes moved to Zoom, right? At that point.
Hmm.
So now everybody's on Zoom at home. finishing their classes. And then they're using this chat platform as a way to communicate with the other students and all of that. That's the idea. And the school now is paying you X amount a month to
Hmm.
host the system and to run it. And now this system is exclusive to this university, obviously. So
Correct.
however you're scaling it, it's still scaled at a university level, not multi-tenant yet.
Right.
Right. So okay, that's fair. And then so COVID lasts about 2 years, right?
Hmm.
Before people are coming back to the classroom, but you're already established at that point. So does that school continue to pay you for this platform? Now it's 2025. Is it
Yeah.
still an integral part of that university?
Yeah, I would say so. They're still licensing the platform. I think the most usage and the most utility was definitely during COVID, and so I think like we've never really reached that level of engagement, but it's still used all over the campus. And yeah, they're still a customer to this day, and so now we're trying to get them onto a new product that we've developed up until recently.
Yeah, we're gonna roll the clock back just a tiny bit too now. So at that point when COVID hits and you have to go home, that was your opportunity to say, I'm done with school. Like I'm not doing it. I've
Hmm.
got a check now. So mom and dad, look at this. I got my own business. I've got a check. I think it's worth my time focusing on this more than getting this 4-year degree. And your parents were like, no problem, son, because now I'm going to go on vacation with the money that we didn't spend. No, how does that conversation go?
Yeah, that's a I think it's one of the more fond memories. I definitely have like memories of, just arguing with them over the phone for like hours trying to get them to let me drop out in those early days. But pretty soon there's actually a button on like your student portal that says like drop out. And I didn't even know it existed until I looked for it. And I was like, okay. And then I did it. So then pretty soon when my parents like didn't get the, request for payment, they're like, what's going on? So I told them
so
like, I
so
did it. Yeah.
wow. So you
I
did it.
dropped
You asked for forgiveness at that
Yeah, so I
point.
asked for forgiveness, and I think by the point I actually did it, we reached a level where they saw that I was passionate about it, that we had some level of traction, and they're like, okay, and then they're all for it, and they actually were our first seed funders. So they took the money that they would have paid for that quarter semester of
Oh,
tuition, they gave it to me,
they
and I'm like,
became
all
an
right,
angel investor on that. That's
yes.
cool.
So they actually became the first investors in Nectar.
You're gonna have it. You don't have a kid yet, right? You
No,
don't have kids. At one point, you're gonna have a kid, and then you're really gonna appreciate all the pain you put your parents through, but why they felt
I
that
know.
pain, right? Because at the end of the day, you just want what's best, right? You want your kid to be able to be self-supporting, and
Hmm.
and yeah. So you're gonna. I got like 7 kids I manage, dude. I can like put myself in their shoes like the whole time, but at the same time, unless it's gonna be a train wreck, you kind of got to let your kids also make the mistakes and do what you or it's too stressful, right? And it sounds like you had those early moments. Do you have any siblings or it's
I have a
just you?
sister. Hmm.
You have a sister, older,
Younger,
younger?
3 years, three
Yeah.
years younger. Yeah, she
So
just
you just next
graduated.
time you see her, you just say thank you because you got your parents to a point now where she doesn't have to like deal with that anymore, right?
Yeah, exactly. Well, she actually just graduated from Cal Poly for pre-med, so she's the first sibling to graduate college.
Wow. Congratulations. That's
She really
nice. Man.
shoved it to me on that one.
That's okay. You still say thank you anytime.
Yeah,
You're welcome. You say not thank. You're welcome.
you're
That's what you
welcome.
say.
Yeah.
You're welcome. You're welcome. And she's gonna say what? Because your parents are easier on you,
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. So you got this platform. It's it's essentially now helping out this school. You
Hmm.
got a check. You got a little money coming in. How many of there are you at that point? There's like 3 of you. It's not a lot of money to get paid at that point, but
Yeah.
enough
It's
to run
not.
the systems and
Hmm.
right.
Yeah, at that point it was my co-founder, myself, and maybe some contracted engineers from Upwork, and that was about it. I think for
And upward. But they're what are they doing? Are they modifying the source code for you at this point to add feature functionality for the system?
yeah, From what I recall, I don't think we added anything. The bulk of the engineering work was actually in the scaling part. So it at a certain point we were on the, DigitalOcean droplet, and at a certain scale there were so many concurrent users using this real-time chat that the highest, most expensive server on DigitalOcean like wouldn't help us. And so what we kind of relied on that point was just like increasing the size of the server until we went to their highest
Yeah.
tier, and like,
But
you know,
was this system designed to be distributed? Like, could you run it across multiple droplets, in other words?
yeah, and that's what we were trying to figure out. And that's where that was the limit of my technical understanding. Because at that point, then you need something like Nginx, and then you need like an ingress, and you need to like do the distributed load between the two things. Like, it wasn't happening.
No. And if there's a database there that has to be able to handle all that, like, that's not a joke. Like, trying to make that run in a distributed environment, especially
Exactly.
when you have state, which you have there, right? No. So if it's not architected from the beginning, that can be really challenging.
Right. Yeah. And at that point, I had no idea. I still didn't know what those things were. So I'd learned, I basically like tried to search ways to scale this. And so we hired a lot of contracted DevOps engineers. That was the bulk of who we worked with, was people who help us scale, fix our infrastructure. We made a lot of mistakes there, and hired like the cheapest person that we could find. And then they would just like screw up everything. I think one guy accidentally like dropped the entire database, just deleted it.
Oh my
And
God.
I had the wherewithal to like say, I feel like this thing should have some sort of backup. And there was a DigitalOcean like service. So you click a button and it like backs it up. So I didn't have to like, you know, fix
You were
anything.
able to go back, like you lost maybe 8 hours or something.
Exactly. We
Yeah,
lost
yeah, yeah,
maybe a
yeah.
day of data.
Yeah, yeah,
People
yeah,
were
yeah.
annoyed, but we could have lost the entire years and years that
System.
we've been doing up until that point, and that would have crushed the company. So it was just like hanging on by a thread, and that's where like not really knowing what you're doing on the engineering side. Now that we have a customer, we have SLAs, we have a contractual obligation for 20,000 students. Like, you can't screw this thing up. And I don't think up until that point I had like more than five people ever like counted me for a group project, let alone, thousands of students.
Ignorance is bliss, Jordan.
Yeah.
Ignorance is bliss, man. But that little voice in your head, that made you press the button that day, like they knew, right?
God,
Like,
yeah.
yeah, yeah. Always listen to the voice in the back of your head, man. No matter, anytime you fight with it, you pay dearly.
Yeah,
Okay,
exactly.
so look, so you're using this thing. It's really single tenant. It
Hmm.
takes a lot to run it in a distributed environment, and that's fine. You have the one school, but if this is going to be a real business, you've got to be able to get this multi-tenant at some level. It's got to be easy to sign up.
Hmm.
So I imagine by what, 2022, you realize that what you need to do more here. So like, what's the strategy? What's the plan?
Yeah, that was yeah, I think it was around 21, 22, because after COVID and we got that first check, that's where we were able to raise our first round of funding. And so we actually had the means to hire real engineers. And so looking
So what was your
actually
first round? What did you raise in your first round? Did you
we
raise
raised,
3 million?
yeah, two and a quarter million
Okay, that's
that
fair.
first round. And I think it
Angel
closed.
angel financing 2.5, or you got a VC to like jump
It
up?
was a VC, and it was even we took a course called TMP 149 at UCSB, my co-founder and I, and the instructors, there were four of them of that course, were from a Santa Barbara venture capitalist firm. And those teachers ended up being our first institutional investors in Nectar.
All right.
So,
So that's a whole nother level of time and like learning, right? Like the whole
that,
VC, like that
hmm
pulls you away from the business for all those months because you
hmm
got to take all the meetings. They want this, they want that. They like, so that's a crazy stressful time too when you're trying to raise money, especially very first time.
exactly. And to that point, like we didn't have like a lot of revenue, so we had quite the multiple. But I think it was at a time where, funding was up. It was, I think, the after 2020, and there were a lot of checks flying around, and we just kind of got lucky for the timing, I think. But also, my co-founder is just ridiculously good now at raising money, so she has a certain talent for these things. But yeah, it was a distraction, and now we have like, you know, I do the product and technology and engineering, and she's very like sales, marketing, raising
Oh,
part.
all
So
right, all right.
kind of
But even like 2.5 million at the time sounds like a lot, but now you know it's not a lot of money. That gives you a year and a half of runway, like in all honesty. Right. But you had 2.5 million now. The check came in. Like, what's your plan? Because you told me you're still on this platform. So I'm really curious what your plan is at that point for the next year to be able to bring in your next client.
right. Yeah, well, first move is hiring engineers. I found emails like way back in all caps of like between my co-founder and I. It's like we could do this if we had engineers, and so that was like the really big limiting factor is that I didn't have the technical ability, so we needed to hire people. So that was mission number one, and then concurrently, my co-founder would be now talking to the other UC schools. You know, we got UCSB. That was a really big win. So like, how can we expand this? So we kind of divided and conquered, and that's where we hired our first two engineers. And that took a long time because I had to basically hire for a role that I didn't know how to determine whether someone was an expert at that. So we did,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
LinkedIn and other hiring platforms, and eventually found a platform that had pre-vetted the engineers on it. So I didn't actually have to do any technical interviews and really just say like, hey, are you capable, willing, and interested in this? And um, those
You got to
two
hire
engineers
fast and fire fast in those situations.
exactly. Yeah.
Yeah,
And it
yeah,
was
yeah.
also really hard to actually find someone and like go through the process because they would also be talking to a dozen other companies, and we are a two-person startup with some money and like a platform that really we haven't worked on at all. Um,
But
but
I imagine that your strategy was to essentially have enough ops to run this a second instance for a second school. So every school would have its own instance of this, right? You might end up with 100 instances per school. Forget about upgrading and all the other stuff yet, right? But
mhm.
I imagine that that was the idea, that you wouldn't try to multi-tenant the product itself. You would run separate instances.
Yes, exactly. And we were not able to do that until we got the engineers. And so one of the first huge projects that we worked on was like trying to make this thing multi-tenant or have multiple tenants because the way that it works that I think we ended up making it so that each school had their own subdomain. So UCSB had ucsb.nectar.io, and based off the subdomain, we would route it to the instance of the school. So that was the first plan of action was like if we really want to scale this, we'd have to expand it, and that also helped with our data agreements because then data was largely separated. So
It's a massive ops project at that point.
yeah, which is what we spent a lot of money on DevOps engineers. That was like the bulk of those first few years was just infrastructure, and it's where I learned Kubernetes. And that was like around that time was when I realized if I didn't start learning these things, there would be no way that I could build this any further. I couldn't hire people for it. I couldn't understand strategically like what thing to build next or how to
But
architect it.
why not bring in another partner who had the technical chops to figure that out?
We tried. We I reached out to like everybody I knew. I had interviewed, so many people on campus who were CS majors. I, got friends to introduce me to other friends who were like very technical, who, maybe worked in the startup world. We came close at one point, but they just wanted, too much equity for what we were comfortable with, and we'd been working on that at that point for like years, and we had the funding. So it felt weird to kind of bring in a third co-founder, and I don't know, it just never worked out and wasn't in the cards, I
No,
guess.
that's
And
fair.
so,
That's fair. Yeah, no, you have to give up. You would have to give up something for that,
hmm
right? So you decided that you were going to then be the CTO, essentially, VP of engineering, like both
yeah,
roles, and you had to
exactly,
start learning all this tech.
right, yeah.
So that means that you got out of if you so you got out of I can't remember the name of it anymore, but you're not doing the droplets anymore. So what did you do? You moved to AWS and Kubernetes to start sort of managing the platform.
Exactly. We realized we needed like an actual cloud platform. So I looked through all of them. We ended up going with GCP because I really liked their
I
interface.
love GCP. No,
Yeah, it was easy
I
to click and drag and all.
JKE. Once you learn it, because it's cryptic too, dude. I'm not an ops guy. I hate ops. Okay, my business partner loves ops. I have to call him up all the time, dude. I'm afraid to press anything in here, But it's the
Exactly.
easiest out of them all once
hmm
you learn it. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. And that's where I learned first what Kubernetes was. And so I can't tell you how many hours I've spent like trying to understand Kubernetes and just like reading through all the documentation I could find, trying to understand like horizontal versus vertical autoscaling, like why do I need to provision like the pods and a node and a cluster and a control plane? Like what are all these things? So
Yeah.
yeah.
But the database they use on this platform, is it a SQL, like a Postgres? Is it a NoSQL?
Yeah,
Because you
it's
can't run that in Kubernetes. You're running that outside of Kubernetes.
yeah. Yeah,
You don't
exactly.
remember.
So
No, that's
it's
fair.
I think it's on Cloud SQL now, so it's just a relational.
Ah, okay. So it must be a relational that
Hmm.
can run on the Cloud SQL, which is, yeah, I mean, essentially it's like Postgres, I think, anyway. So that's fair. Yeah, no,
Hmm.
no. We use, I wouldn't be, we wouldn't, you wouldn't be able to use it for what you're doing, but I try to keep things so simple. I can just use Cloud Run and let
Mm,
Cloud Run sort
I
of
love it.
scale services, right?
Yeah, looking
With a
back, I wish I
database.
could just have everything on Cloud Run. Get rid of Kubernetes
Cloud
all.
Run is like, and it's cheaper. Like we got
Yeah.
all our stuff out of Kubernetes because that's compute that's always running. Where Cloud Run, now your product probably would always have to have a few instances running anyway. But yeah, the Cloud Run to me is beautiful.
Yeah, but I think Kubernetes isn't. It's like the orchestration part and just like keeping it up. It just introduces a lot of unnecessary complexity. Like unless you are Google or a really big company that has dozens of microservices, like Rat probably wouldn't have done it. But that was all the documentation that was on there. So it said like if you want to like scale this thing, you got to put it on Kubernetes. And so then we just
All right, but if this platform is just a database, is this platform just a database and a single service? Because
pretty
then
much
you could, so then you could put it on Cloud Run, dude. Like, what's stopping you from, if it's a single service
yeah.
talking to the cloud database, then you can use Cloud Run. Right? I could tell it to scale as big as you want. Your ingress can still do all the routing.
Yeah. Yeah, I think there was something about it eventually that we realized, or looking at it now, that the way Rockchat was built, it wasn't meant for, these super huge implementations. We actually stretched it to its limits because we didn't build the core of the code. Like a lot of it was kind of inherited from the open source community. And so what it was meant for is like you're a company, you can self-host it, you use it for, your business, a couple hundred people max, and that's fine. But using it for tens of thousands of people, it was like stretching it to a place
Yeah.
where it wasn't
Yeah.
supposed
Yeah.
to
You're
be.
pushing it.
Yeah, we had to do all sorts of funny stuff to just get it to work, and then even then it was a struggle.
Yeah. No, no, I hear you. Like the thing that I always have to remember if I'm going to use Cloud Run is you can't really keep it in memory cache all the time. It's going down, right? When it comes back up,
Hmm.
you got to figure out what you're going to do with like those are some big mistakes you can make early on because when you're testing at your desk, it's always running, right?
Hmm.
Now you throw it in that environment where in Kubernetes it can always be running, so you gain some benefit there. It's
Right.
cost some money, but it's always running.
Exactly.
But then in your multi-tenant, then are you giving each customer their own cluster in a sense? Is that how you do it? Or
Yeah.
is it at a namespace level?
Well, the way we do it now is we actually re-engineered, because we finally hired the engineers. Now we can like build it how we want it, and
Okay.
making a completely separate cluster or like even a separate service for every single school is just like unfeasible, or because at scale you'd have hundreds of these, and at a certain point,
Yeah, no, no.
we'd just
It's a
be mandating
management issue.
workspaces for everybody, and it didn't
Yeah.
work. So we were like, we need to make this one service, and need to make it like single tenant. Now I've like I still don't really understand between single and multi because now like we've went through and we've done hybrid where we do like a little bit of both. So every school has their own service, but like they share a database or something. So it's funky. But yeah, now we have
So that
everything.
makes sense. So every school is connecting to its own service, which is good because you got that process boundary sort of security. There's no right, but they're all leveraging the same, say, the database instance. They probably all have their own database on that instance
Yeah.
to yeah, no, that's good. What's wrong with that?
Yeah. Well, we changed it a lot. So that we did that eventually, but I think now today we have everything so that it's shared. So shared
Truly
service.
multi-tenant.
Mm-hmm.
Anybody can connect to any server
Mm-hmm.
and isolate to their data. Yeah. But
Exactly.
that means you had to go and get into the code, right? So
Mm-hmm.
at that point you sort of forked the code and
Right.
turned it into your own. Did you
Yep.
have to, so now this gets interesting, right? Because you've now decided that you've taken this open source, you've commercialized it,
Hmm.
you're forking it, you're making money on it. So talk to me about the licensing that came along with that, because dude, if I'm the guy that wrote the open source and now you go and do all this, I mean, I I'm just gonna put it out there, bro. I want some money. Or what the hell's going on here? So that's a whole nother thing. You got to talk to me about that. You must have thought about licensing and what we can and can't do.
Hmm. That's a good question, because I didn't actually think it would be a problem at first, because I think one of the first things I did in those early days before I even knew, the extent of open source was like, okay, they have a license. Like, I read it and it seemed like it was fine. And every, few months to a year, I would like reread it to look at it. Like, did I actually understand it? Because I was so paranoid about, us not actually using the technology correctly. And especially when we raised the round, we had to go through due diligence. Like, is the platform that you're built on, can you actually use it? And like, it was always yes. They had, I don't think it's an MIT license necessarily, but it was a specific license that allowed commercial use. So we could take it, we can make it our own, and we could sell it. But to your point, the guys at Rocket Chat didn't appreciate that. So I think they had raised, probably was like in 21 or 22, they had raised something like $20 million from institutional VCs, and they started as an open source, and that was their first round. And so we actually got pinged by their, I think it was like their chief product officer at the time, and we're like, hey, like, can we
Uh,
chat? And I was like, okay, what's the worst thing that could happen? They're talking to us, and like, you know, they basically said like, stop using our system, or like they really wanted to get us over to their enterprise offering where they hosted it and you paid them to like do everything. And
makes
we are like,
sense. Makes
yeah, and
sense.
we're just like, no, we have our own thing, like it's fine. And they didn't appreciate that a lot.
But their
That
license allowed it, at least the version you were using.
Yeah, it was the smoke and mirrors. Like they said that, that we can. I'm like, from your license, like from open source, it says that we can do it. And they just didn't like that because I think it was people coming into the
How
company.
quickly did you make a copy? Did you fork that repo from the time they first called? Because that would have been the very first thing I did before I took the call.
Yeah.
They could
And that
bring it
was,
down tomorrow, right? Like tomorrow, that could go down, disappear.
yeah. And I mean, that's the beauty of open source, that someone somewhere would probably like post it. So I wasn't necessarily nervous that they would take it down. Definitely nervous that they would change the license. They do have an enterprise edition. So there are two versions. There's the community enterprise, but yeah, we had by that point we already had like made a bunch of modifications, and we were kind of like
Were
taking
you
the
trying
change.
to? Were you pushing your changes as PRs back to their repo, or
No,
you were
we had
keeping
made a
it for
fork,
yourself?
and then we have our own completely managed fork, and then we would
Gotcha,
rebase with
gotcha.
their changes every now and then. And so
Okay,
we
that's
did a
fair.
very painful process of like merging all of their things with all of ours, and it would
Yeah,
take
yeah,
like
yeah.
a week or two. But then we got all these new features kind of like for free.
For free.
Um,
Yeah.
yeah,
But
but
their community version had licensing that allowed you to use it commercially, essentially.
exactly.
Did they change that licensing now, or their community is still
I think
like
they
it,
still have the community version, I think, but the executives at Rocket Chat did not. They don't like it.
at the end of the day, they can say what they want, but it's interesting that they didn't change the license on the community edition for the next release that they had, right? So that
Right.
don't make any sense to me. Look,
Yeah, I think it's, some business MBAs coming into an open source company. And I think like the value of open source that you can, bring to the community, and people can make, commercial offerings. And that's the beauty of it. It's like no strings attached, puts it out there. And I think it brings a lot of goodwill to the technology. And I think there's some people that don't understand that part, and they only see business and dollars, and they want to make, buck off of everything. So they go to like the companies that they see are successful. I think it was the wrong philosophy, and I don't think they understood how that worked.
well, again, you did the due diligence with the VCs, so you knew you were going to be okay. Like that wasn't going to be the issue. I just find it fascinating that they didn't change the licensing for the community edition after that,
Yeah,
which is right what's been happening. Even HashiCorp at some point had to change licensing.
right.
And it's fair if you want to do that, like it's fair. And then you
Hmm.
wouldn't have been able to get any more upstream changes, right? But you legally have your version of the platform. Yeah. What is that platform written in, by the way? I'm just kind of curious. You know,
Rocket Chat? It's
Yeah, yeah.
all JavaScript, the through and through. So the
So
mobile
it's
app has
Node.
React Native, yeah, Node, and
Uh,
they use Meteor as the framework. So I think it's not as popular anymore, and it's kind of a pain to work with. And so, but it was, I think they built it when Meteor was like kind of newish and it was really, gaining
Dude,
traction.
that's front end, dude. Every year a new front end framework comes out. That's why I only do vanilla JS at this point. Done with
Mhm.
it, man.
Yeah, I'm all for it. Yeah, so they React Native for the mobile app, Electron for the desktop app, and then Meteor for kind of the web.
That's amazing.
Hmm.
Have you ever thought about just putting money towards your? I mean, at this point, it wouldn't even make sense, right? The platform is feature rich; it has everything you need in it. So, I'm kind of curious at this point. So, let's talk about this point, 2025. Um, I'm curious how many schools you have signed up and how many employees you have up at this point.
Yeah, well, 2025 we have about 10 full-time team members. We've raised a total of, $6 million, another 4 million about a year ago, and we're in about 100 different schools.
That's
So,
amazing, dude.
yeah, but the ironic thing is that not most of those aren't with Nectar Chat. The original platform, we've spent, it's the 75% of our company's existence. The product that we were working on during that time is not our, flagship anymore. We launched a new one called Nectar AI about a year ago, and that is the one that we are kind of moving forward with.
So, is this Nectar AI also a chat platform? Or is it something else?
No, it is a platform that allows instructors to make custom AI assistants trained on their course materials. So this is kind of the the new development. We even raised our second round off of Nectar Chat, but we pivoted about a year, May of last year, and we still offer Nectar
Give
Chat.
me give me the spelling of the website, dude.
nectir.io.
Nectir
ir.io.
.io.
Yeah, you can also just look up Nectar, like nectir on Google.
I see it now. All right. Some weird stuff comes in if I don't use I and I use A.
Yeah, that's the tough part. We got to figure out that name.
Okay, so you moved. I mean, you're still going to run your chat product, but when did the idea of this sort of future classroom come into play?
Yeah, well, we had Nectar Chat for a real long time, and then ChatGPT became really popular, and all OpenAI had, their APIs out, and these language models became really, really good. And so we were like, we had to find some way to use this. Like, this is the coolest thing ever. So we made this little bot within Nectar Chat called Soma. And Soma, kind of lived on the sidebar, and if you were the owner of a channel and you're an instructor, you could upload, a couple documents to it, and then students could chat. So you could do at Soma, just like you would add someone in Slack, and you could ask it questions about the course. And that was a really cool feature. And it ended up helping students so that they actually didn't need to rely on the teacher or their classmates. They could just ask the AI. So
Which large language model were you using behind that? The
that was,
Gemini, since you're already on Google?
no, that was GPT 3.5 at the time.
Okay, so the OpenAI
Hmm.
models there. All right.
Exactly. Yeah, but pretty soon we continued to try and sell Nectar Chat, but it's just really tough to sell a chat product because Teams, for Microsoft schools, gives Teams to schools for free, so it's really hard to compete with that. Slack, I think, is like slowly being adopted by schools, but very little. So I think it's just, the demand wasn't there. So pretty soon schools were like, they saw the Soma thing. They're like, can I just buy the Soma part? Because that would be fantastic. I get Soma in all these classes, all these students get help, and it kind of worked out perfectly because we spent years and years working on this giant scalable platform that could deliver kind of this messaging chat interface to people integrated with classes. So while it's a completely different technology, it's actually kind of the exact same, where AI is so different than what we've been doing, but it uses the same interface. So we can take a lot of our learnings from Nectar Chat, apply it to this new thing, Nectar AI, sell just the AI part, and make it so that students get 24/7 support at any time. And we're really solving the same problem that Nectar Chat did, which is trying to get students help when they need it in their class so that they can, succeed and
So let me
graduate.
ask you a question. You're getting them help, right? But
Mhm.
is the content that's being delivered to them content that's already part of the LLM, or are the schools and the professors uploading specific content related to their class that they can then interact with?
There's a balance. The majority of it is teachers uploading all of their course content. So the teachers have, dozens and dozens of documents about the entire course. They might even have an open source textbook. And so rather than relying on the training of the language model, which in the 3.5 times, there was a lot of hallucination. It would kind of make up stuff and it'd sound good. But if you added just the context of the documents they uploaded, it made it dramatically more accurate. It grounded it in truth. You could add sources to it so it could reference where it talked from. So it was perfect. And that was, now RAG
So okay,
process.
so yeah, this is a big RAG. So you got a big RAG operation going now because so I
Mm-hmm.
played with these RAG systems, and for me, the biggest challenge is how you chunk the data in a way where you get a quality vector search, right?
Mm-hmm.
That can then be fed to the LLM to provide a quality response. Like, so it's prompt and chunking that like either you win or lose this game on both of those. So
Exactly.
my imagine is you got a bunch of data scientists now that have figured out the best way to chunk all this sort of content. What are you using for a vector database at this point?
Uh, we use PG Vector now through Postgres.
Okay,
So it's
through
along next
Postgres.
to our production data. Yeah. So we actually don't have to use a
No, that
dedicated
makes
vector data.
sense because you have their. I've been using the Mongo Atlas for the vector. We like Mongo.
Mm.
We do a lot with Mongo database. I like the when you don't really need the structure of it. I think Mongo is pretty cool. Talk to me about the challenges you faced learning that because I think that's where I think like the rest of the tech is an API call and a database call and right. It's prompting and chunking. I mean, can you talk a little bit about like your journey through that a little bit? I don't want any secrets. Okay, I'm not asking you for your prompts and anything. That's proprietary. All right, but just the struggle. In fact, that gets me depressed when I have to start a new project with new content. It gets me depressed. One, do I have enough content? And two, how do you chunk it? But you got the content, so so
Mm-hmm.
talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, there's no lack of data in these classes. Every course has, so much information, and the teacher has so much knowledge that really wasn't the tough part. So the content's there, and every class at the bare minimum has a syllabus. But you're exactly right. Like the chunking part and the actual process of getting these documents to be, have a quality size and chunk and have retain the meaning there was really tough because if, for example, one of the early instructors who piloted this put in this 1950s NASA documentation. The entire thing was sideways. It was like scanned. It was super low quality. He's like, "Oh, let me just test it." And then like obviously it didn't do very well. So like
Yeah.
these teachers will look at it and they don't just have documents. They have these old documents. A lot of them, they might teach history. They might teach things where the information is 20, 30, 50 years old. So we have to accommodate for a very wide range of quality. We also have to accommodate for a very wide range of media types because in a course you might have audio and video and images and text, and you'll have
Yeah,
PowerPoint
you're
and Word
multimodal
documents
there
and
too.
PDFs.
Yeah.
Yeah, and a lot of these, like, it's not docx, it's doc. So it's like the older version of these Microsoft files, and those just a lot of things have a hard time.
And you're not putting everything in one vector database, right? Like, I mean, if I do a question about this class, I really only want you to search around that class's material. You searching somebody else's class isn't necessarily going to make my life better, right? So
Right.
even how you're organizing all these chunks of data and where to go query uh, is interesting.
Well, one of the earliest features that we added was a knowledge scope. So we have general knowledge, topic knowledge, and document knowledge. So it basically means like general, you can add the context plus the knowledge of the language model. All the way in the opposite end is document only. So it should only answer based off of the documents. So that kind of helped with just answering off the documents, and then we would just use the filtering in the database to make sure that the right information was pulled for the right, system that was
How
talking.
long you been building this platform here, the content platform? This started last year.
Yeah, I flew to Brazil in November of 2023 and had a hackathon with our engineers. And we launched it in May of 2024 last year. And that was kind of when we went, general.
You must have a really interesting admin back end side that the say professors can use to upload documents and get
hmm
them organized, right? Because that can't be a manual process. The professor has to have the ability to sort of upload all that, right?
Right. I mean, we've over time made a lot of different integrations. We now enable like everything from videos, images, documents. We also make it so that you can, we're going to making it so you can export your entire course and then import it into Nectar AI. So it's a special kind of zip file called a .imscc file. It's one of those standardized things that you can, take from Canvas and put into Blackboard or Moodle. So we actually are able to parse that and, import into the class.
But it's but the essence of this is now as a student taking Professor Plum's class, I could go on to the Nectar platform for Professor Plum and basically kind of ask the professor questions in a sense, or ask his material questions
hmm
about anything related to the class, right? So that's that's super interesting, actually. That's really interesting. How many schools are using this platform right now? The same ones that were using the chat?
Yeah, that's I mean, UCSB, our first one is like we're actually like talking to try and get them to adopt it. A lot of our schools are in the California community college system, so we started in California, we're naturally kind of expanding out. So we were working on a pilot with them, so we're in, 80 different California community colleges in various capacities. So yeah, a lot of our customers are actually from Nectar AI.
So there's a couple things now that pop in my head when I think about this. One, you got to be really careful with the security and the privacy of this stuff because Professor Plum doesn't want Professor whatever in another school seeing that material per se, I guess.
hmm
So you've got to provide guarantees that there are real walls of isolation. The other thing that's interesting, maybe more interesting to me, is what if Professor Plum uh, uploads my notebook, which I authored, that he just happens to be using for this class, and I did not authorize the upload of this material in the system, right? Like, is that your problem? Is that Professor Plum's problem? How do you even know that they're uploading material that they own?
Yeah, I mean, it's
These are the
kind of
things
like
that keep me up at night, dude, when I think about these problems. Okay.
yeah, same here. I mean, that's the we tell instructors like only upload things that you own, and it's part of our contract. Ultimately, it ends up being on the instructor and onto the school to make sure that the things that they upload to our system are, um, all that they own it. Either it's open source, or that they've developed, or they've had permission for it. But I think that is going to be more of a problem in the future, and like as we scale, they're going to take all these documents regardless of whether they're open or not and like upload to the system. And that's, a big problem even what's happening today with image models. There's plenty of copyrighted material being uploaded into the model and, training things unnecessarily. So yeah.
Even with GDPR, if you ever get over to Europe, like you
hmm
need a back end process to be able to delete things with a record of that. Because if you want to get into Europe and you're not already focused on GDPR, which I don't know how the United States does not have some form of GDPR today. I honestly don't. But that's another whole thing with this content, right? Your ability to, uh, when you get the letter to say remove this off your system, that you can effectively.
Right. Yeah, and it's definitely a gray area because an instructor might have the permission to distribute it, a textbook, and they buy it and they put it on their class page, and then all their students can use it. But it's the same thing taking that and then uploading it to a model. But our entire pipeline is data safe, and we use our own private endpoint in Azure for OpenAI and GPT-4o. So like we don't.
So you went over to Microsoft
Yeah.
now for some cloud. Is that because of the OpenAI stuff?
hmm
Because it was already hosted there. So
Yeah.
you're running on both platforms now, or you moved everything to Azure?
No, the Azure stuff is really just for the AI things, only because they have OpenAI. So that's really the only the only reason that we use them for that. And then some of their document processing tools are actually pretty good, so we use some of those. Um,
I find that interesting, dude, because privacy and security is a big deal right now in this AI space, right? One of my clients, which is Prediction Guard, we've built an infrastructure platform so you can basically run your own models within your own compute, um, because more and more people are too afraid to do anything on these cloud platforms for the hosted, right?
right.
Because look, you don't really know where that went, where it's going. I don't care what they write in a privacy policy, dude. I honestly do not care, right? But you can get your own compute in Google and get your own node and run that there and feel pretty confident that that compute is isolated to you, right? As opposed to using a public API. I know it's easier and more convenient to use the public API, but have you thought about any of that with this? This isn't like top secret financial data and stuff, so maybe you get away with it. But people are paranoid, man, and I'd be nervous. I'm just throwing this out to you, right? Like I'd
Mhm.
be nervous if you told me, "Oh yeah, we're just using the basic open AI public endpoints to get model responses back," as opposed to, "No, we're running the models ourselves. It's on this compute, but we're the only traffic that goes through this."
Yeah, no, it's definitely a valid concern. I think the with the schools that we work with, 90%, 99% of schools either use Google or Microsoft for just their authentication. So they already trust to a level these companies like Google and Microsoft with the private information of their students. And so when we come to them and say, we don't, directly license GPT-4o from OpenAI. We actually use it via Microsoft. So we're under the Microsoft umbrella of security. And Microsoft has all sorts of, DPAs and, agreements, and you could even use their endpoint which is HIPAA compliant. So it, I think, has the security requirements necessary for our customers and even especially like government funded, federal funded institutions. So it works for us, but I definitely see the value in the potential of open source models and then self-hosting them. For us, it just doesn't make financial sense quite yet because you do need like a certain scale and throughput and
It's
for
another set of
people to
ops.
like manage
Yeah, it's
it.
another
Yeah.
set of ops. Or you look at companies like Prediction Guard that already sort of do it, and you just tell
Mhm.
them drop a cluster. We've got clients over there that want air gap, dude.
Oh,
So,
yeah. Well,
oh
then that's a great
right.
example.
Like these are the
Not
models
quite at
I
that level.
want. Yeah. I don't know how many people really need to be at that level anyway, but yeah, like, but that's like right. The idea is okay, fine. We'll drop a prediction guard system, and the APIs are the same. You want to pay if you want to pay for the compute, not you, Jordan, right? Like
Hmm.
customer X wants to pay for the compute, then give us some GCP keys and tell us what models you want, and no, you don't have to worry about this going any farther than your infrastructure. And you can, from a platform perspective, it's just where am I making the LLM call really at the end of the day?
Exactly. And if I had everything that I wanted, it would, the schools would manage their own API key. And there's some schools that want to like have their own language model or like host it on campus for whatever reason. So if they just give us an API key, yeah, it's not that hard to switch out. So I'd actually prefer that, because then they could have control over that. And I think that would be the best solution.
That's for me always the best. You want to take responsibility for your infrastructure, take responsibility. I don't really care, right? Better you than me.
Right.
um, Man, super interesting stuff. It's amazing how you were able to pivot. I'll be honest with you, last year, I thought anybody sort of pivoting in the AI space, it was already too late. I
Hmm.
thought that if you hadn't already been trying to build product since minimum 22, you wouldn't have enough of a polished product today to be in the market. But I feel like you built all new UIs for this new platform. You didn't, right? You had to because
Right.
it's all new code. But you did that last year, and now you have a fairly um, finished product. So kudos to you, man, because I feel like you want to get into the AI game now. You're just too late, unless you got a lot of money and you can do something in 3 months. With,
Exactly.
but it takes time to polish something. You know that your first version of anything just works, but it's about it.
Right. Yeah, and I would, I give credit to our team. I think one of our engineers actually built the first version of Nectar AI in 3 weeks, and we had it up and running. And like you said, it takes a long time to polish things. So we've just been iterating and iterating. But yeah, we've come a long way, and we've just spent a ton of time investing in this one thing and being very focused. And I think, education with AI, if you were just a company pivoting to it and just wanted to do stuff in AI, I would agree with you. Maybe it's not the best investment, but I think for education specifically, this is the single greatest market that has the most opportunity to be innovated with this type of technology. I think there's a lot of other things, there's healthcare and law and accounting, like those things will come, but I think this one is going to be the first to be completely revolutionized.
Healthcare already has it, actually. There are companies that have been in that
Hmm.
healthcare space for 30 years that were sort of ahead of this already, too. I've seen them.
Hmm.
See, I'm a back end dev, Jordan. Okay. That's where I live. And I
Hmm.
find that, um, especially on these types of systems you're doing, the back end work is easy. If you need the top talent front end developers to be able to move really quickly and move properly in the beginning. Like I bow down to front end devs that can do that. It's so impressive. The back end systems here are almost just now plug and play at this point. Make an LLM call, make a database call. You need strong data scientists and strong front end to sort of stay ahead of the curve here, because those UIs, if the UIs are wrong, nobody wants to use it anyway.
Right. Yeah, and that's where we've completely built this platform from the ground up. We had our experience with open source, but now everything is completely customized. Every pixel we've thought about and designed. So yeah, I think a lot of it now is, engineering in general. It's going to be commoditized. These language models can build anything in a matter of minutes. Like, why do we exist? I think the future is going to be in the hands of those who have, taste and a vision, and the builders and creators. So now you don't need the technical skill. You can just, do whatever you want. So,
And so we're talking today primarily because this platform, as far as you're concerned, is ready to go. It's ready for prime time.
yeah.
And I would imagine that this goes beyond just university, right? I mean, high school. Just about anybody doing anything educational that has that big thick book in front of them, right?
Hmm.
The idea would be to get that in the system and start leveraging.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, we're primarily focused on Howard at the moment, but really anybody can go to our website and sign up and test it out. We have a self-serve version. So if you're, instructor, administrator, even a student, you can go on there, upload your documents, chat with it, and give us feedback. So yeah, it's out there.
Yeah, I've been playing with some demos where I've got video classes that I have, and we try to do like speech to text and put it in there. I don't think we did the chunking really well. I don't feel like it answers. I think the video stuff is really hard because when you're writing stuff, the content is solid, but when you're just speaking, sometimes that content isn't as strong as you think it is for these types of things. That's been my experience so far with the video that we have.
Yeah, that's a
But
good point.
it could be a chunking issue too. It's really hard to chunk. Like you don't see paragraphs at that point, right? And I might like ramble on for 20 minutes. Well, you can't have a 20-minute chunk, right? So how do you? Oh man, stuff blows my mind. So it sounds like you've got some good data science engineers over there figured this out.
Yeah, yeah, a lot of good engineers. We do have a data science as a data scientist engineer helping us out. So it's and the chunking is a certain part of it. I think if with these models, we are definitely exploring ones with larger context sizes. I don't think the chunking will be as difficult. You just do like bigger chunks and bigger pages and just throw up everything into the language model. It'll figure it out. I mean, like Gemini with the million context size, I think it'll be less and less of a problem.
But at the end of the day, if somebody signs up, they're basically logging into Nectar and they're
Hmm.
choosing their school or whatever that is, and they're working on there's no sort of white label or integrations. So like this is what I'm thinking, right? I want to add this to my website because I want people to ask questions. I don't want to build that myself. I could put it in Nectar, but then what I need is a little chat sort of window in the bottom corner of my website
Right.
that right is interacting with Nectar. I mean, nobody necessarily knows that. Like that you don't have yet, right? That type of integration yet. But you
Well,
have APIs. Do you have APIs? So if I put all my stuff in Nectar, then I could just go through your APIs to build my own UI in a sense.
Yeah, we don't have APIs yet. We're thinking about it. We do, however, we do have a live chat functionality, but we're, like I said, we're focused on education. So now in beta on our system, you can actually embed the little live chat corner window thing to your LMS. So if you're a school, you can put in your LMS, and every student on campus has access to all their classes in a little easy window. So we're expanding to make it so that you can really put this thing anywhere. You can put it
Yeah.
in LMS,
At
put
the
it
end
on
of the day,
website.
you need a niche. You don't want to be the generalized
Yeah,
agent. Like there's systems out there already that are the generalized agent. I always think that if you need a niche, if you have the niche and you're the top 3 player in that niche, like you're gonna make money. It's just kind of
right.
how it works.
And that's where we want to be with education. I mean, we think it's our niche, it's what we're passionate about, it's our mission. I think it has the best social good, and we get to have fun doing it because we get to work with the coolest, latest technology, and bring that to schools. So, yeah, it's like the best of both worlds.
All right, nectir.io, just so everybody's listening again. Dude, well, we've talked for an hour and a half already, which is crazy, isn't it?
Yeah. Wow, already.
Yeah, dude, I told you, it's just like sitting down at the bar and having a drink and just sort of jamming. That's what we do here. But this was really interesting. I'm also really impressed that you started building this piece last year, and it looks as polished as it does. Okay, so we'll put all this in the show notes, Jordan. But if anybody wanted to reach out after listening to talk to you about anything, like what's the best way for somebody to reach out?
Yeah, just email. You just email me, Jordan@nectar.io. So I'm always open to chat and love feedback and love talking to the community. So definitely reach out.
Brilliant. All right. Well, this is Jordan Long and Bill Kennedy signing off from the On Labs podcast. We hope to see everybody again real soon.